So I recently made a video where I remade Pokemon Emerald Sky Pillar in Unreal Engine 5, and you guys really liked it. But here's the thing with it though, it kind of sucked, so I made a better one. Now you might be asking, Jesse, you just did a Pokemon video, why are you doing another one? Well, if you were paying attention to the channel after the last video went up, I did a bunch of polls to determine what I should do in this one. If you're sad that you didn't get to vote, then congrats, you're like the other literal 99.9% of people that aren't subscribed who watch my videos. But in any case, I'm glad I got to spend another couple weeks on this project because in the last one, I had to spend the vast majority of my time programming. Which meant I could spend pretty much all my time polishing the rest of the game, which is pretty much just art. And first on the menu for art was actually changing out the player model and having some animations for it that didn't look absolutely terrible. But first before that, I had to make an actual material for the player character whose name is, Anyway, the way the Pokemon games animate the faces of characters is a bit wacky, so by default the face texture looked like this. The first change I tried didn't end up looking that much better, and so I had to do a bit of material coding to get the face texture to be where I wanted it to be on the face. And hey, now that I have this on a variable, I can change this dynamically within the game to make the player blink and react to things, so I'll probably use that for something later. Once the face was all patched up, the next most important thing to do was, you guessed it, add physics to the bag. Now I would show you how to do this, but unfortunately learning character body physics are a gateway to the dark arts. Instead, I'm going to move on to making the player's animations, which were problematic. See, the reason the player animations in the last video looked so terrible is because I used a little something in Unreal called animation retargeting. Essentially, for 3D models to be animated, they need a skeleton. Like a normal skeleton, they have bones and joints, and so what you can essentially do in Unreal is take the animations from one skeleton and throw them onto another one, which I did in the last video by taking the basic animations from the default Unreal Engine player model and putting them on the model I wanted them to be on. I tried to use the same process here, but the results were, So this meant it was time to take to Blender. I skipped over all that for you though because I'm the last person you should be taking animation advice from. Because while these animations that I made looked a bit better than the retargeted ones, they still looked awful. So I had to call for some help.
Yo.
Hey man, I was wondering if I sent you like a rig and stuff, could you make some animations?
No.
Okay, but like what if, now that wasn't my problem anymore, I can move on to more important things, like the environment. Oh right, I should mention I also put a bunch of new Gen 5 Pokemon into the game. I chose Superior as the starter because it's my favorite one, so, you know. Anyway, first things first, I found the 3D model for End's Castle from Black and White itself on Models Resource, which was super helpful because when I went about actually remaking the castle, I could use it as reference, which, by the way, was about as easy as... Okay, so it wasn't exactly like that, but it was kind of like that. I mean... It's not that hard, I just copy and pasted some walls everywhere. What was more interesting to me though was that I had to recreate the interiors and make them look real nice because of the incredibly harsh critic that was going to be playing this game. See, a lot of you guys in the last video were questioning just how playable the game was, and for good reason because it pretty much wasn't. But my goal this time was to make the game actually playable, so have it look better while actually having it run. So I had to find someone who could be a reputable spokesperson for the Pokemon community, and I did. Let's see what he thinks.
I think it's so cool.
So after that, I had to actually go about making some specifics of the castle, so like all the rooms, including making End's room sufficiently unique, as well as this random server room that they have. I don't know what this is supposed to be. But after all of that, it was time to move on to the final big room. I started off by pulling a photo from the room... I started off by pulling a photo of the room from the game and then modeled all of the floors and walls. Now much like the rest of this castle, I had to improvise a bit when it came to making the roof because the camera in the original game just sees downwards. If you think about it, the roofs just don't exist in the original game. So I put in some fancy looking chandeliers and made a terrible throne out of stone, and the room was pretty much done. Except actually for one aspect, which is that I was going to be making cutscenes in this room, and in the Reshiram cutscene he breaks open the wall. In order to make that happen, I had to cut out a portion of the wall that I made and turn it into a destructible mesh. And that got me the result I wanted, except you could clearly see where the destructible mesh ends and the rest of the wall begins. I thought for a while about how to fix this, but then I realized something important. All I had to do was lie. Video games are mostly just smoke and mirrors anyway, so, you know. But once all of that was finally done, I could walk into this final room. In a PowerPoint presentation. Now let me be clear. In my last video, I didn't even try to optimize anything, which is why it ran so poorly. But this time, it had to actually work. So I created a bunch of sublevels with some triggers that load them in and out as you play through the level, and so I could keep everything looking really nice while also running somewhat okay. Although, I should probably explain what sublevels are. It's pretty simple. A normal level is just an area with some stuff in it. It's where the game happens. A sublevel is when you take parts of the level and split them up, and then load them during the game depending on where the player is so that you don't have to load a bunch of stuff that you don't need. Also, conveniently, sublevels not only help optimize the game, but can also hide stuff that you don't want the player to see. So remember in the last video when I was talking about how Pokemon games cheat when they use 3D space? Yeah, they do that a lot with this castle. With the sublevels, the parts of the castle that I don't want you to see at the beginning simply aren't loaded. By the time all this was done, my friend had finished all the animations I needed. So I went about animating some cameras and then put it all together. And that took the catching animation from nothing to this. Oh yeah, there's also a new running animation for the player, which is like good and all, even though the old one was like beautiful, but yeah, I guess it's a bit of an improvement. But finally, once all that was done, all that was left to do was to make some small polish changes and not actually forget to model this beginning area. And hey, I also made some cutscenes. That just about wraps up the video though. If you all enjoyed, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. You've heard it all before. If you don't like it, leave a dislike. I can understand why you do that. I can get behind that. I can see why you do. If you want to see a full gameplay of this, head on over to ShadyPenguinn's channel. He'll have a new video when this one comes out. Should be about the same time. But that's it. Bye bye.